It's another Thunder Thursday on News OK Live. I'm Mike Sherman, sports editor of the Oklahoman, here with our Thunder coverage team in full. From the newsroom just above me on 9000 North Broadway, columnist Barry Trammell. Also from the newsroom, right above me, our columnist Jenny Carlson. From across the street in Oklahoma City, across Britton Road at the Thunder practice facility, beat writer Darnell Mayberry. And from the panic room, somewhere on the Opubco compound, Thunder beat writer Anthony Slater.
I've been here for like 4 days. I can't find a way out.
We'll work on that in just a second. But first, let's remind everybody that Thunder Thursdays are sponsored by our good friends at Wheeler Chevrolet. Take that drive down I-40. Save yourself some time and money. Guys, the Thunder is reeling, having lost 3 straight, 5-5 in their last 10. Gave up 42 points last night in the fourth quarter and lost to Cleveland. Should we call this a slump, or has something serious been revealed about this team? Darnell, we'll start with you.
I prefer to call it a malaise.
Malaise.
I like that word. I think you can call it a slump because it's not just the last 3 games. It's the last 10 games. They're 5-5. They've got some really bad losses up in D.C. to start the month. Orlando losing on a buzzer-beating dunk. Who does that? So there's some really bad losses, and even the good performances or the wins weren't really good performances. So I think this is sort of a slump.
Anthony, you've been there. You were on some of these trips. Malaise, slump, or something more serious?
I mean, it's a slump. They've lost 3 straight games, but every team in the NBA had lost 3 straight games. This is the Thunder's first 3-game losing streak. So it's not really, that big a concern. There's obviously some defensive areas they certainly need to shore up. I mean, they've given up their highest point total for, 3 games this season. 126 to the Clippers, 114 last night to the Cavs, who are the worst shooting team in the league. 2 42-point quarters. But it's more about energy, effort, and that kind of deal than it is some schematic or personnel problem.
Barry, does the fact that energy and effort has been missing coming off the All-Star break, is that any special cause for concern?
Well, it's just such strange timing. It's like Three River Stadium. We're in Pittsburgh all of a sudden. You got the confluence of all kinds of things happening. The All-Star break, Russell Westbrook returning, Kendrick Perkins departing. So it's just one of those things was happening. You could sort of focus your research on that. But with all 3, you don't know what's causing what. And I think it is a slump. RFD is right. They were playing poorly before the break, playing poorly after the break. The defensive letdown to me is what's alarming, though. To have back-to-back games where you give up 40-something points in a quarter, it's one thing to do it to the Clippers. They're sort of capable. But the Cavaliers stink. And to give up 42 points in the fourth quarter is just an abomination and a sign that they weren't mentally locked in.
Jenny, we'll turn away from what to call the slump to what are the causes of it. I'll start with what you wrote for Wednesday's paper. I lose track of my days sometimes, but when we got word that Kendrick Perkins was going to be out for 6 weeks, you wrote, okay, those of you who hate Kendrick Perkins, you've gotten your wish. Now they've gotten their wish, and so far we have not seen anything resembling a defensive effort. Jenny, is it as simple as the Thunder missing Perk and all that he brings?
Well, I think that has to at least be part of it. It looked like to me that last night there were definitely instances where the Cavs took it to the hole, and you got to think if Perk's standing there, if he's on the floor, if he's in the game, that maybe they don't quite have as easy a path to the basket. And it just looked like to me that, he changes that defensive dynamic in a lot of ways. I mean, we were talking about this at lunch. It's like 9 guys on the floor are all aware of him because I think the opponents are obviously aware of him and where he is, but I also think the other 4 guys playing with him are aware of him. And, they want to do what they're supposed to do so they don't get the wrath of Perk. So he affects things in a lot of ways. And I'm not going to say that this is all about him being gone. I think, like Barry said, there are, myriad reasons all kind of coming together here that are coming into play. But you at least have to look at some of those drives to the hole that the Cavs scored on in the fourth quarter last night, and think, hey, put Perk out there, put his scowl in the lane. You think they'd be driving to the hole quite so easy? I'm not so sure.
Darnell, who's more scared of Perk, the opponents or the Thunder?
In what sense would the Thunder be afraid of him?
Maybe afraid to play defense the way it has the last two games.
Well, they need him, that's for sure. And I think, Jenny hit the nail on the head. We're kind of seeing what this team is like without him, and they're 0-4 without him. So Perk has always said, check my winning percentage to kind of back up his value for this team. And you can't argue the fact that this team wins a lot more with Perk than it does without him. So it's not all Kendrick Perkins, of course. I mean, Russell Westbrook and Kevin Durant have a lot to do with that. But Kendrick Perkins definitely does help this defensive unit. Although what they're doing right now is not just a problem with Kendrick Perkins being out. That's not it. I mean, Kendrick Perkins being in the lineup is not going to help them not give up 42 points in the fourth quarter to the Cavs. So they got some other things to figure out as well.
Guys, let's try to isolate this defensive effort a little bit more, and anybody jump in on this, but I'll start with Anthony. What specifically are you seeing on defense? Maybe a trip down the court that makes you put your finger on it and say, yeah, that's it. That is what's missing for this team, or this is the problem. Anthony?
I think it really starts on the perimeter. I mean, they've been getting torched lately by guards. I mean, good guards, obviously. Wade went off on him. Jamal Crawford and Matt Barnes went off on him. Matt Barnes, everything Matt Barnes shot, he was wide open. And then obviously Kyrie Irving and Jarrett Jack last night. So it's really kind of perimeter players that are doing it. I mean, I remember there's one point late in the game last night where Kyrie Irving, he gets a wide open three on the wing. He didn't even bring the ball up. They just left Kyrie Irving wide open. Tavo kind of got over late. Brooks was mad. Everyone was kind of looking at each other. So I think it's a communication issue, and I think it's just kind of a want-to issue. Reggie Jackson is not playing good perimeter defense. Tavo hasn't been playing good perimeter defense. None of their guys, they're not stopping penetration, and then that's leading to Serge Ibaka can't block everything. Kendrick Perkins isn't there, and it's just breaking down the whole defense basically, and that's why you're seeing easy hoops pretty much all the time right now.
Barry, there's a stat that came out. I guess it was John Schumann of NBA.com pointed out that the Thunder ranks dead last in contesting of jump shots. You buy that stat, and could that be just sort of the stat that's plaguing this team right now?
Well, it's not a good stat at all. Now, there are some things that contribute to that. I would assume, if I was guessing, I would assume that the Thunder probably leads the NBA in contesting shots in the paint or shots at the basket, with Perkins and Ibaka and, frankly, Collison and whoever else, too. So, I mean, the Thunder protects the rim very well and protects the paint very well, and that's going to lead some open shots. But no doubt about it, the Thunder has been lax in defending the perimeter. That AC talking about that shot Kyrie Irving hit, he had time. If his shoe had been untied, he could have stopped and tied his shoe and still shot an uncontested jumper. He was so wide open and seemingly no one interested in getting out on him. So that has been a serious problem. What to me is alarming, though, is that especially these last two games, if Dwayne Wade and LeBron James light you up, you sort of salute and say, well, they've done it to better teams than us. But Sunday against the Clippers, Thunder just didn't get back on defense. That was just a total brain lock on transition defense. Last night, the Thunder played pretty good transition. Cleveland didn't have that many fast break points, but in the setup game, they were very, very poor, and especially that fourth quarter, Cleveland had not shot the ball well, and then all of a sudden they score on 20 of 26 possessions. So it's not it's not one thing. It's something different every night, it seems like, in this slump.
Jenny, what do the early reviews look like to you on Russell Westbrook's return? I don't think Jenny heard me. Jenny, you there? She's not.
Get unmuted.
Okay, unmute.
There you are. Hear me?
Yeah, I hear you fine.
Okay.
What are the
Sorry.
early reviews on Russell Westbrook's return? We're having some problems with Jenny. I don't think I can now not hear her. Let's go
There
to
you go. Can you hear me now?
Yes, come on.
Okay, sorry.
That's all right.
I think it's decent. I mean, I don't think he's back to form by any stretch of the imagination. As with the last time, I think the jumper is going to take a while just to get himself comfortable and get himself in the rhythm that we saw him before he had this third surgery. But I think as far as his mentality, he's showing that willingness to go to the hole, to put his body on the line, to do those sorts of things, which to me, that was always the question when he came back the first time was, mentally, is he going to be able to say to his body, let's go, let's get to the hole, let's crash, let's really be physical. And he was, and he is again. And to me, that's a good sign. I think the Thunder did this little 3-game losing streak just to give the folks at ESPN something to talk about, because we were watching over the noon hour a little bit, and it seemed like all they were talking about was this Thunder 3-game losing streak. So it's apparently big news, but it's not Russell Westbrook. It's not his fault. He's playing decent. He's going to play better as time goes on. But my early thoughts about him are positive. I think he's in a good spot.
Darnell, is it Westbrook? Is there any chance that this malaise is not, of course, it's not an offensive. Westbrook is getting some decent output on offense, looks aggressive, attacking from some different angles even. More baseline I saw last night. But is it possible this defensive malaise, this getting torched on the perimeter, is a Westbrook issue?
I wouldn't put it all on him. I mean, part of it is him, yeah, but it's also Kevin Durant, it's Thabo Sefolosha, it's Reggie Jackson, it's Jeremy Lamb. I mean, all of these guys are getting lit up defensively on the perimeter, so you can't just put it on one player. Everybody whose man is out there, they're scoring on them, so it's not just Russell.
Anthony, the Thunder's defense not having Perk on the back end to tie things together, having Steven Adams, a younger guy back there, what are the early reviews on him? And is the defensive effort, is this a lot on, we talked earlier about Steven Adams and his pick and roll defense. How much of this is just having a rookie playing in the middle?
Well, I think his effort's there. I mean, he may be one of the only guys on the team whose effort seems to always be there as far as, he's trying to get out on stuff. Sometimes he's maybe over aggressive as far as fouling. He obviously doesn't, know the schemes, or he doesn't have the experience. And, like you said, a pick and roll defense or stuff like that. He doesn't tie things together. He doesn't have the loud voice out there communicating, calling out people. Or even if, he tried to call out Durant or Westbrook, which obviously I doubt he would. I mean, it's just not going to have the same kind of oomph with it. So, I mean, I think there's something to do with that. But I don't think Adams has played poorly on defense the last couple games. I think, like I said, I think it's a lot more of a perimeter thing, a team-wide thing, an effort thing than it is, Steven Adams is the issue.
Barry, we said in the paper today, we had a quote from Kevin Durant saying this is not a coach issue, this is a player issue. But the blog you posted this morning on newsok.com seems to disagree with that.
Well, this is basically Scotty Brooks' job. Everybody wants to get on Scotty for strategy and that kind of thing, but heck, the strategy in the NBA, this is not football. You're not playing Battleship. A bunch of NBA coaching is motivating players and dissecting problems and figuring things out, and that's what Scotty's job is when things are going badly, like they have been these last few games, he's got to right the ship. He's got to figure out why the defense has become suspect, why they're giving up so many points in crucial times, and he's got to fix it. Now, I don't claim to know what the problem is. I don't think you can attribute it to Russell Westbrook. Frankly, Russell Westbrook is a much better defender than Reggie Jackson, and taking minutes away from Reggie is only going to help the Thunder defense. So there's no way it can be that. And what's attributed to Perk's absence, what's not, those are questions that are for Scott Brooks, and that's his job. His job is to fix situations like this.
Jenny, how much does fatigue play into this? I know they had the All-Star break, but Thabo Sefolosha, the guy who is really called on to give second and third effort every time down the court, the guy who chased LeBron James around, is there any chance that he and Kevin Durant are wearing down right before our eyes?
I mean, in the list of things that are coming into play here, I think you have to at least think somewhat about fatigue. I mean, we talked a lot about Durant and his minutes in Westbrook's absence, but I mean, everybody was having to pick up extra slack when Westbrook was out, and I think that, is maybe being seen a little bit here. Maybe with Westbrook back, there was sort of a feeling amongst the team, sort of almost a sigh of relief. I think maybe everybody to this point has mentioned effort, and it does seem like at times that effort has been, you just don't see guys hustling back. You don't see guys always closing on guys like they should. You don't see them, picking up a man instead of their man. Stuff like that should be happening doesn't seem to be happening. So maybe everybody's feeling a little bit of that fatigue now that Westbrook's back, or sort of letting their guard down a little bit. I'm not sure what the answer is, but you got to think everybody was picking up a little bit more. If not minutes-wise, there was more pressure on everybody to perform and do some different things. So you got to think some of that may sort of be weighing on them, and maybe we're just seeing a little swoon now. I mean, the Heat had that swoon earlier in the year when it was just like, these guys don't look interested. They're not playing very well. Maybe right now we've just got a team that's sort of, just going through the motions a little bit, and we'll come out of it. I still think they're one of the best teams in the NBA, but right now, obviously, they're just not playing very well.
The slump, the 5-5 record, the 3 straight losses have made it a race again in the Western Conference, but there's a different kind of race going on, Darnell, one that you wrote about in Sports Monday this week, and that's the buyout race. There's a lot of players, a lot of spare parts, but some experienced spare parts floating around out there. What's the latest on the Thunder, its open roster spots, and opportunities to add some of these guys?
There's a report this morning that Caron Butler has narrowed his choices between Miami and the Thunder, or maybe not narrowed his choices, but those two are the front runners for his services. So Caron Butler could be in play. I doubt Danny Granger is going to be in play for this team just because he's not going to be able to find a way to get a lot of minutes on this team. Even without Kendrick Perkins, you're still playing behind Kevin Durant, the league's leading scorer. So I think the Danny Granger thing is kind of a pipe dream. A lot of people want Jimmer Fredette. He's a guy who hadn't played much in his career so far. So if he's going to go to another team, and it's his decision at this point, I think he's going to go to somewhere where he can play, not somewhere where he's going to become like the 13th, 14th man. So there's a lot of options out there, but I still think a guy like Roger Mason might be the guy who the Thunder might settle on, just because he's a pro's pro and he can shoot the three. So I think that's the kind of guy that they look at.
Let's talk about Caron Butler for a second. Darnell, you and I used to argue about him. Remember when I used to tell you he was the Wizards' best player and used to say it was Arenas?
That's right.
I still stand by that. And
You're both probably wrong.
But
Arenas used to be.
Yeah.
Thank you, Slater.
Hey, he's still making $22 million this year. He's still getting those checks.
With the ball in his hands and in line at the bank, Gilbert Arenas is better, yes, and no doubt about it. But Caron Butler still
with a gun in his hand.
Yeah, that's right. That's part of it too, of course. But Darnell, Caron Butler and Danny Granger are sort of same size. Why do you think that Butler is a better fit for the Thunder?
Well, I think he's healthy. That's the first thing. Danny Granger has missed most of the last 2 seasons with this knee injury and knee surgery. So I feel like both of them can be good perimeter defenders. They both bring some toughness and veteran experience, and they both can knock down the three-point shot pretty good. But just the fact that Caron Butler is healthier and has been playing more consistently over the last 2 years than Danny Granger, I think that's going to be the deciding factor for the Thunder. If they are even going after those 2 guys, I think Caron Butler would be the guy that they would choose over Granger.
Anthony, so Shane Battier, now Caron Butler, in a way, Mike Miller, 3 times Heat-related players, twice before the Thunder missed out on them. How's this one going to go down? Who would Caron Butler rather play for, Oklahoma City or Miami?
Well, I mean, we're talking about a guy that was drafted by the Heat. You know, he's good friends with Dwayne Wade. I'm sure he's good friends with a lot of people within that organization. But if he wants to play more, he may see a bigger potential role with the Thunder. Although I don't think he's getting really big minutes for either team. So and the money's going to be similar. So we'll see. I mean, you'd think he'd lead towards the Heat, but the Yahoo story that came out said he's given the Thunder strong consideration. You know, obviously I can't confirm that, but I mean that's kind of an interesting part of it. He's a career 34% three-point shooter, and we've kind of heard this team's going after three-point shooters. So, I mean, I don't know how well he fits into that. I think he's shooting 36% from three this year. So we'll see. Maybe they're worried a little bit about perimeter defense. We saw them going after Iman Shumpert, or, you know, rumored to be going after Iman Shumpert. And Butler's a decent defender. I mean, he's not elite by any means, but I think he fits a need, but it's not like he's going to come in and be 25-minute-a-night guy.
Barry, is there anybody out there in buyout land you can see making a difference on this roster?
Oh, I think somebody like Granger or Butler would be a nice addition. I don't know that they would be huge difference makers. You know, it's hard to find defensive guys, I think, at this time of year because they tend to not make that much money and nobody's interested in buying them out. So, you know, right now the Thunder need some defense. In the playoffs, Caron Butler would give Derek Fisher some help on the perimeter at the outside marksmanship. So, I mean, I'd sign up for Caron Butler. The thing I like about Butler over Granger is Butler's older and more likely to just want to win rather than playing for his next contract. Granger's still young enough; he can probably get a decent contract here in this free agency period, where Caron Butler knows that his days are numbered and he probably just wants to win.
Jenny, anybody out there you like, or do you? I throw out there Roger Mason. He's a guy with the San Antonio Spurs pedigree, and those guys would seem to fit in well in Oklahoma City. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think any of these guys are intriguing for sure. You know, you sometimes don't have quite I don't know, maybe this doesn't seem super deep, but you at least have some guys to look at if you're in the Thunder's position. I think Granger with his injuries, I'm a little skeptical of him, so I'd probably say not him. But I do think Roger Mason is interesting. I mean, I think anybody that could play that, what do you want to say, maybe Mike Miller role in a playoff series. You know, look at what Mike Miller did in spot duty for the Heat last year. He came in and kill a team. The Thunder, or 2 years ago, the Thunder saw that up close and personal. So if you've got a guy that could potentially catch fire like that, obviously you don't know if that's going to be, you know, Caron Butler or Roger Mason or anybody, but you know, so guys like that, it's an interesting move to me. I'm like Anthony. I don't think any of them would play a huge role, but I sure think that there's a possibility that, you know, maybe they would play that Mike Miller, you know, one or two game in the playoffs where you're like, man, sure glad this team got this guy.
I think any of these guys we're talking about, most of them kind of, you know, they're of the wing, you know, shooting guard variety. They're kind of more Jeremy Lamb insurance. If Lamb continues to struggle, and he has struggled the past month, come playoff time, if he's kind of, you know, not playing well under the spotlight, these are all veteran guys that have played in situations like, you know, late playoff type scenarios where, you know, you may not want to use them, but if you have to because Lamb's playing bad, you have them, you know, you have them on your bench.
Guys, let's look at the road ahead. Darnell raises the idea in his Thunder Rumblings blog, his post-game notebook, that, of course, the Thunder's lost 3 straight, gone 5-5, but it could just as easily reel off, start another winning streak. That's what the Thunder did when it was 5-5 last time, went on a 10-game winning streak. But I ask you, does these next few games look like the start of a winning streak, starting Friday night with Memphis? Darnell.
Yes, that's why I blogged about it. But I think the Thunder has a favorable schedule coming up. Starting with this Grizzlies game, I think it's going to be a blessing in disguise for them. I mean, it's a tough Grizzlies team, but this is a matchup that is always a slugfest for the most part. The two defensive teams that really get after each other. Now, without Kendrick Perkins, who knows, it might not take on that form. But of the 11 times the last times that these two teams have played, only one time have both teams been in the hundreds. Only 3 times has one team been in the hundreds. So you would think that the Thunder is going to get back to its defensive identity against the Grizzlies on Friday night. And I think that could be a turning point and lead to some more wins coming up, because they got Charlotte and Philly after that. So this is a time that they could turn it around.
Jenny, you buying it? The Grizzlies look like a tough foe coming in for a team that's not playing very well defensively.
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm just not as optimistic as Darnell, but I think that's going to be a tough one. I think, the Phoenix game next week in Phoenix, team having a pretty good go this year. The Suns are. Then the Lakers game, that seems very winnable. But then you got the Rockets, guys that are going to try to get to the basket again, which after last night, perimeter defense being what it is, interior defense not maybe being there, sort of backstop the way it has been in the past. That seems troublesome. So are there winnable games out there? Yeah, absolutely. And I think after this Memphis game, the next two, I mean, the Thunder doesn't win those two, then we really got an issue. But, to me, there are some games embedded in this next little run of 8 or 10 that if they don't get things going defensively, I just think it's going to be an uphill, struggle. Maybe they'll get some things turned around. Maybe a defensive-minded game like this coming up, like Darnell said, maybe that is the tide turner. But, golly, they struggle with Perk to handle those big guys. How are they going to do without him? I'm just not super hopeful.
Anthony, you mentioned Jeremy Lamb, and just looking at the games coming up, do you see any, is there a light at the end of the tunnel for him? He played so well in stretches, especially that winning streak. He looked like he really belonged. What's eating him?
And I think Darnell's writing about this a little tomorrow, but I mean, fatigue. We're talking about a guy who's never played more than 40 games in a season, which was, I mean, the year UConn won the national title, they played as long as you can for a college team, and that was probably only around 40 games. So it's a little bit of fatigue. The NBA season is a grind. So I think it's a little bit of that. Also, right now, I don't know if it's maybe a confidence thing, but as Westbrook's come back and he's struggled a little bit and Derek Fisher continues to play really well, they've kind of cut his minutes a little bit. I think he played 16 against the Clippers. I'm not sure how many he played last night, but, not maybe his typical minutes number he was getting used to with Westbrook out. So I think there's a little bit of that. He's not shooting well. I think he's shooting something like 29% from three in the last month. I think that's an interesting thing to follow moving forward. I don't know if it turns around or it doesn't.
Barry, I'll let you have the last word on the Thunder right now. The tactic often employed by Phil Jackson when the Lakers were struggling was to let them figure it out on their own. The Lakers, many title contending and title winning teams have been through stretches like this. Is there any chance that's what's going on with Oklahoma City? They're figuring it out. They're realizing the way they need to play, even though these guys have played a lot together.
I would say no. I don't think the 2014 Thunder bears much resemblance to those Phil Jackson Laker teams in terms of experience and resume. The Thunder does have more veteran leadership than you might think, with Perkins and Collison and Fisher and even Jackson. I mean, even Durant and Westbrook are grizzled pros by now. But I don't think there's much figuring it out right now. I think Scotty Brooks is trying to figure it out and get his guys straightened out. I think most of them are bewildered about what's gone on these last several games.
Thanks, guys. That's all for this edition of Thunder Thursday on News OK Live, but you can stay with the best coverage team anywhere, every morning in the Oklahoman and every day on News OK. Again, Thunder Thursdays are brought to you by our good friends at Wheeler Chevrolet. Take that drive down I-40, save yourself some time and money. Thanks.